For those people living here in the Pasig area around Capitolio, San Antonio, and Barangay Pineda, it's a supermarket and a market day for all of you. Please be observant of physical distancing. In any case, for the rest of our viewers all over the Philippines and abroad and on Facebook, I'm Cito Beltran. Good morning, and this is the program Agenda. Today, we're going to have quite a lineup, and allow me to read the list. We will have former DOH Secretary Esperanza Cabral, Congressman Benny Abante, Congressman El Rey Villafuerte, and Jojo Tandok, Vice President for Human Resources of Semirara Mining. We will also have Volta de los Santos of the Pasig Tricycle Operators, I think, Management Office, and Joey Concepcion, Presidential Advisor on Entrepreneurship, but he has taken a different personality now. Now he is the Rapid Arc Man. We will be interviewing all of them. And before we begin, please allow me to just share a thought with all of you this morning. Yesterday was quite a different day for me because I received a couple of calls from different people from different states in life, and most of them were a cry for help. People seem to be now, 2 months after being in quarantine for 2 months, more and more people are running out of cash, are getting desperate, and are worrying. In fact, some of our friends, and it might surprise you, yes, you'd say, "Oh, Sito, you're a middle class, upper class. You wouldn't have problems." Ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of our friends out there, your friends, that who may not be saying anything but quietly suffering. And may I just ask all of you to look into your friends. Ask them, especially those who you obviously don't have a lot of money, may have a lot of kids, don't have high paying jobs. Just check on your friends. And for those of you who are members of Christian churches, Iglesia, born agains, and even Catholic churches, look into especially the missionaries, because we don't think much about people who are missionaries. We don't think much of people who are doing church work, and going along based on what you gift or support that believers give them, and particularly orphanages. I mean, you got to think about it. There are zoos that are running low on funds. There are places, offices that are running low, and how much more for these places. So if you know of an orphanage, you know of a missionary, or you have a friend, please look into them, check in, and just find out. And sometimes don't even wait for them to ask. If you feel that or know that they are in dire straits, just give them a small gift. And mind you, I just discovered something. Some people, just by receiving little things from here, there, and everywhere, they end up with a substantial amount to see them through. So if all of us just kind of start giving each other or giving those in need, even little amounts, and everybody does it, we're going to help other people survive and make it through. Because the last thing I would like to be reading about on the news is people just giving up and ending it all because they just couldn't handle it. And this morning, my wife and I, we were praying for the parents out there who are struggling, praying for parents, because it is the parents who worry the most. They're the ones who are feeling the extreme pressure of what to give, how to support their children. So please, if there's any news that I would like it to read, it would be the good news that Filipinos have started to give money to other Filipinos. And for the news, let's go now to the headlines of the Philippine Star. Here are the stories from the front page of the Philippine Star. The Philippine National Police is deploying officers in malls to make sure shoppers will observe COVID-19 health protocols like physical distancing. PNP Deputy Chief for Operations Police Lieutenant General Guillermo Elizar made this statement yesterday But he also added that malls must implement the no quarantine pass, no entry policy. This is to prevent overcrowding in shopping centers. An expert warns of a looming crisis in public transport as the Philippines transitions to the new normal, slowly allowing public vehicles back on the road amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Robbie C. of the Move as One coalition said that the public transport sector is like a ticking time bomb due to the threats of the coronavirus. Aside from that, C also said that half of those in public transport might go out of business due to the physical distancing measure, which effectively reduces their loading capacity down to 30%. To solve this, C looks at the big picture and pushes for reforms in the sector, which include investment in infrastructure, changing the way buses are deployed and drivers are paid, and developing bicycle lanes and stations. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque called on the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, to submit an inventory of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, under their care. This after OFWs have been complaining about the long period they have been stranded in quarantine facilities. Some, according to our sources, are even complaining of having to pay for their own accommodation. Roque assures they will look into the complaints and get a commitment from OWA into resolving the issues. There have been reports of OFWs escaping from quarantine facilities, with one even making it to his home in Quezon City after testing positive from COVID-19. Next news, jump-starting the economy seems to require more from the government, as the Finance Department says it needs 1.74 trillion pesos to salvage the economy. This amount is higher than the earlier estimate of 1.45 trillion pesos. Finance Secretary Carlos Sunny Dominguez said the new amount is equal to 9.1% of the country's gross domestic product, or GDP. His agency's game plan for the economy consists of four pillars: emergency subsidies for vulnerable sectors, funding for medical resources, fiscal actions to keep the economy afloat, and assisting industries. Okay, those are the headlines of the Philippine Star, and we will continue with the news later in the day. And for now, let me find out if we already. Okay, we have on the line former DOH Secretary Esperanza Cabral to give us her assessment of how she assesses or how she grades the government's action plan in fighting COVID-19. Secretary Cabral, good morning po.
Magandang umaga sa inyo lahat.
Okay, good morning, Secretary. And as I explained to you during the briefing, we would like to spend a good part of the program to hear the assessments made by different people from different experts from different fields. And you get to go first, Secretary Cabral. What is your assessment of the government's action plan in fighting COVID-19 and managing the quarantine?
Thank you. Well, more than 2 months ago, I said that I felt there were four imperatives that government had to do if we were to reduce the toll of coronavirus in our country. And let me benchmark my comments against those things. The first I said was that we have to know our enemy, where it is, how many of us it has captured. And the second was we should be taking care of our ill. The fourth was we should be protecting our frontliners, and that's the third. And the fourth is we should be protecting our citizenry, because this is going to be a difficult time for all, and because many of the things that we are going to ask the citizenry to do will be a hardship on them. We need to be able to assist them. So, on the basis of those four things, knowing the enemy, taking care of the ill, protecting the frontliners, and protecting the citizenry, I go back again to a statement that I made, which is I'm sure the government is doing its best, but now we have to say that government has to do more of its best until its best is good enough.
Okay. So do more until it's good enough. So
Correct.
if we are to follow the UP grading system, it is not pass fail, it is incomplete.
Yes, right. I think that we should do more in order to fulfill the requirements.
Okay, what are the things that the government needs to do, Dr. Cabral?
Well, in the first,
What are the more?
okay, in the first imperative, which is knowing your enemy, we of course refer to what the DOH says. Its tactic or strategy, which is to test, to trace, and to treat. Okay, so if we take testing, obviously we have not tested enough, so they have to do more. And I believe that Mr. Concepcion later on will have more to say about this. In all of these things, it is important to note that private sector has really stepped up, particularly at the start of this crisis. For example, many organizations like the towns, when government was still not providing personal protective equipments in significant amounts to the health workers, private sector stepped up, and the ones who made it possible for health workers to have adequate personal protective equipments was the private sector. It is time for government to actually step up and take over this function, which is really theirs. And I'm glad to note that about a month ago, we received 1 million sets of personal protective equipments, 600,000 of which have been distributed, I am told. And it said that yesterday or today, they have been delivered another 3 million sets of personal protective equipments. They should get these things immediately to the hospitals and other health facilities so that our healthcare workers do not suffer from having to take care of people without adequate protection.
Okay, so as far as quarantine is concerned, what is your assessment of quarantine as a policy solution to dealing with COVID-19?
It is an option that very many countries have taken, and we are included in those countries. And I think that in one form or another, quarantine is important and works.
But
It's just that
it's
to the
just that.
degree, yes, yes, to the degree that we have implemented it, and to the degree that we have enforced it, I think a little needs to be done, because we are too much of a hardliner as far as quarantine is concerned. Maybe they have reason, which is that many of us are not disciplined, but I don't really see how jailing people who violated quarantine is going to solve the problem. If we are doing quarantine so that people distance themselves from each other, and people get to jail where in 10 square meters there are about 20 people, that is not going to help solve the problem.
That seems to be where the government or the IATF is having problems. They're instituting quarantines. They have so many versions of quarantines, and the quarantine, instead of becoming relaxed as it gets longer, it becomes stricter, and you are obviously referring to being to compassion when violators are arrested.
Yes, it's the same thing with telling people to wear masks. I do not think that when they see a person who is not wearing a mask, that the proper thing to do is put this person in jail. I think the proper thing to do is provide this person with a mask and provide this person with the motivation to wear the mask.
And I suppose, this reminds me of the time when the military tried to capture the Abu Sayyaf in Mindanao and somewhere way down there in Sulu or somewhere, and they said we have the entire mountain surrounded, and the Abu Sayyaf escaped, and they learned a lesson. It's easier to control a hill than to control a mountain, and that's what Joey Concepcion has been talking about. Let's do quarantine on the basis of barangays that are affected, and not in trying to quarantine regions because it's just not really practical. Okay,
Yes, I think we need to
Dr.
go.
Cabral. Yeah, Dr. Cabral, there is a push to open the gate, so to speak, try to go back to normal. What is your sentiment or opinion on how we can best do this? Because it's an either or thing. Government said we need to test everyone who goes back to work. And then
Yes.
now, yesterday, they said, well, private sector, you're on your own. You will have to do the testing if you want to. It's not mandatory. But how would you best implement this return to work strategy?
Well, I'll say that we need to have a policy. If our policy is people returning to work need to be tested, then government must provide the wherewithal for testing and not leave it to the private sector, to the employers to do this. Obviously, some employers will be able to afford this, but many others will not, particularly those in small, micro, and medium enterprises. So they need to be helped by government. They cannot be told that you can do it if you want to, but if you want to, you are going to have to pay for it. They're going to say, I'm not going to do it. So you need to have a definite policy and you need to have a definite implementation for for the policy.
Yeah, so right now they said you can go open your businesses, but you will
Yeah.
have to provide rides. You can send your workers back to work, but you're going to have to test them if you want to test them. Now, the probability of another outbreak, are you convinced that if we go back uh, without testing, there is a probability that we are going to see a second wave? And I mean, is it logical? Because I just find that, I'm sorry, I just really find that illogical for many experts saying we need to avoid the second wave. We don't have vaccine. We know that the virus cannot be seen. So sooner or later, someone is going to get into contact with the vaccine, and you will have recurrence of this. So what is this obsession about fighting a second wave if it's inevitable?
I agree with you. The reason why we locked people down is so that our health capacity will have some time to build itself up to take care of the expected second wave. That second wave is expected. We think and we are very almost sure that a second wave will come around. And the reason why we wanted to lock people down was that our health system capacity can reach the amount necessary to be able to take care of people who will get sick, because we cannot lock down people forever.
Yes.
So there will be a second wave. Fortunately, our healthcare system has scaled itself up, not sufficiently, but I think they've done a good job of trying to know where the ventilators are, where the ICU beds are. They've done a good job of putting up these isolation centers and things like those. And I have confidence that if a second wave occurs, the healthcare system is going to be able to take care.
Okay, Dr. Cabral, we have a question here. Can we really call it a second wave when the cases have not gone down? I think because of testing, we are only now discovering that we have more cases of actual and asymptomatic cases. So, have we flattened the curve?
Well, if you look at the data that the DOH presents us with, it looks like the curve has flattened, but we have not really bent the curve. What happened was from daily case rates of about 500 a day, we are down to an average of about 250 a day. And we have remained at that point for the last 3 or 4 weeks, where we would have wanted for the 250 cases a day to have gone down to, say, 100 or 50 or something like that.
Okay, now you're still practicing, I suppose, or you're still in touch with the community, with the health community. Going
Yes.
back to the hospitals, etc. We did quarantine to buy time for the health sector to build up its capacity, set up remote quarantine areas, to set up COVID-19 hospitals, etc. So that if there is a, if and when, and there will be a second wave, as you agree, we will have the ability to respond. The question
Correct.
is, do we now have the logistics? Yes, we have the facilities, but do we have the logistics in terms of medicines, in terms of equipment? Because yesterday, one of our guests, Dr. Richard Mata, was saying that the ECMO machines, I think that's a blood oxygenator,
Yeah.
is a vital tool. But I was told by one of our viewers that one day use of an ECMO machine is 1 million a day in a private hospital. So are there enough of these machines out there, and also the medicines?
Uh, we have enough medicines, but as far as the ECMO machine is concerned, I don't know what is enough, because that is a machine of last resort. Let's put it that way. So whether we spend 40 million pesos to get an ECMO machine, or spend the 40 million pesos to buy several more ventilators and medicines, is an ethical question. Would you rather spend your money on things that have a higher possibility of saving people, or would you rather use that money to on someone whose chances of survival is really nil? Because when you're at the point where you need an ECMO, it's almost always a given that you are going to succumb to the illness.
All
Very
right.
few people ECMO are going to survive.
Okay. Now, here's the hard question that I would have to ask. And like I said, and I've already aired this, we have no political agenda. We are not taking any sides here. We are hoping that by discussing and making the assessment with experts such as yourself, those who need to make decisions will be guided accordingly. Now, is there, you said earlier that the private sector has stepped up. Many big corporations have been supporting our health frontliners, helping government, etc. But in terms of policy making, analysis, decision making, the executive part of addressing this crisis, would do you what is your view? Do we have enough participation of the private sector? Because I wrote in my column, the president is surrounded by political appointees. Yes, they may know a little here, a little there, but I haven't heard of a Dr. Tony Fauci who is running the campaign of the United States, a Dr. Zhong who is running the fight for China. Do we have a person or a medical expert in the Philippines at that equivalent level?
There are many health experts in the country, both in the public sector and in the private sector. So it's a
Mhm.
simple matter of identifying one and appointing him to run the show. Um, in the matter of private sector, they have really helped the government, and rightly so, because 50% of the healthcare system is really private in nature, and 50% of the healthcare system is public, and they mostly take care of the poorer patients. But when coronavirus came and we needed all of these intensive care unit beds and ventilators and so forth and so on, the private sector actually took care of 80% of the seriously ill coronavirus patients. So when we, for example, look at who are the people running the show, maybe government can really think of getting private sector into the act, not just to provide the services, but to help with policy making.
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned that, Dr. Cabral, because at the thick of the fight, some people mentioned to me, Cito, why don't you get the guys from Makati Medical? I said, why? What's special about Makati Medical? And he said, do you know that they haven't lost one patient to coronavirus? I don't know how true that is, but apparently their batting average is quite high. And that led me to think, uh, are we actually sharing information? Or are we even consulting? Because parang puro na government appointees yung IATF, even the public information. So you are saying there are real experts, there are very qualified experts, both in public and private, but they are not on the
Yes.
team.
No, I think that they're they're only waiting to be called. The private sector is only waiting to be called. They are very willing to help.
Mhm. Would you've been Secretary of Health? How is the setup? Because it would seem that everything is just so so concentrated to a small group of people, and I would think that under this situation you would spread things out. O ikaw, Secretary Cabral, bahala ka na doon sa mga OFW, o ikaw, Beltran, bahala ka na dito, spread it out. When you were Secretary of DOH, did you discover, or are you aware of a limitation or a restriction that prevents the IATF or the Secretary of Health from tapping all of these experts in the private sector?
There are no limitations. They can always ask somebody for advice, although they cannot pay these people and these people cannot be signing checks or disbursing money. There are very many things that can be done by private sector together with government if government asks for their help.
Yeah. What about you and all? I know that you and several other secretaries of former secretaries of health have been invited to Malacanang at least once for a consultative
One.
meeting with the president. But
Yes.
so has there been a continuing consultation? Has there been, like I think Congressman Rufus Rodriguez said this yesterday, there must be a council of advisors.
I think that's a good idea. Um, yeah, as I said, private sector is just waiting to be tapped.
Okay, well, we will see Secretary Dr. Cabral, former Secretary of Health. We will see if we are able to create ripples, and I hope our viewers will join us in creating ripples to get the message to the president that we all are in this together, and we need to ask experts like yourself and those in the private sector. Thank you very much for your assessment. So your grade is an incomplete. For the student, that is something to worry about because it makes the work longer and harder. But in any case, I'll take an incomplete over a fail. Thank you very much, Dr. Esperanza Cabral. Please stay safe, stay strong, and stay healthy. And God bless you, ma'am.
Thank you. You too, Sito. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's former Secretary of Health Esperanza Cabral, and as she pointed out, the government or the IATF really needs to push for more testing, and they still need a lot of stuff to step up on. And they need to test more. They need to bring in we are in agreement that they need to bring in more from the private sector and the experts in public health. And at least I have one person who agrees with me for the moment that uh, second wave, stop talking about the second wave because this is a continuing engagement. This is not a first wave, second wave, third wave. Until there is a vaccine, this is a continuing engagement. It is a continuing war. We will go for a pause on that, a quick break, and we will come back right after this break. Please stay with us. You're back here on Agenda. I'm Cito Beltran, and you're watching the program via Signal TV, channels 8 or 250, as well as the Facebook platform of One News PH, and of course, YouTube. And before we carry on with our next interview. We are speaking of assessment. I just got a message here that I had my wife print, and it comes from one of our readers and viewers. For those of you who don't get to get a copy of the Philippine Star because you are way out there in the provinces, you can read my columns on the Philippine Star Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the opinion section via internet. Just Google C Talk by Cito Beltran and you will find the columns. Now, for today, I wrote about this assessment, pass, fail, or incomplete. And we have this letter, and I don't normally read letters, but this guy is a retired CEO from a very, very big organization. And this is what he wrote. Good article today, on point. You expressed well what others are feeling right now and for some time. Part of the bloopers, in parentheses, is cool bukol, is that while Secretary Galvez is a capable leader, his group is designed to fail. Note that in his limited press conference as chief implementer and in his meetings, Duque doesn't even attend and just sends a lowly DOH director to attend as a warm body. And this is a public health crisis. Also, DTI is not there to represent organized groups that can be mobilized, so Secretary Galvez's group cannot execute well. His group doesn't even have testing in its deliverables. In addition, spokesperson Roque has all the platform on COVID, not the chief implementer Galvez. The ugly head of politics and corruption is showing again. There is also money in COVID testing, and people are sensing that fundraising for the 2022 elections has started using COVID money. Wow. In any case, that's just feedback from someone I know and whose opinion I respect. And I guess that's an assessment as well. Now let's go to our next guest, Congressman Benny Abante. He is the minority leader in Congress. Congressman Benny, good morning po.
Magandang umaga po, Brother Cito. How are you?
Okay, I'm fine, and you're beginning to look very hip and cool. Hindi congressional ang dating mo, Manong Benny.
Hindi pwede. Hindi tayo pwede magpagupit.
Okay, as you've been advised, we need assessment so that people will understand how the leaders evaluate the government's approach or strategy in containing COVID-19 and the national quarantine. May we know your assessment, Congressman Abante?
Well, we're not really, comfortable with what is happening. No, number one, the minority bloc has actually filed a resolution, and we would like that massive testing ought to be conducted, and test ang panawagan namin tulad ng build. It must be test. Kahit po dumami, even if there'll be a lot of people getting positive cases, yet we would be able to know accurately who the people are and where the areas are. But right now, it's not being done, no? Yesterday, the Senior Deputy Minority Leader, Janet Garin, even delivered a privileged speech and accusing DOH of buying some testing kits and even PPS that are actually overpriced. See, it means that they're not actually buying from the manufacturers. You know, perhaps they're only buying from the dealers, whatever it might be. But we're not that comfortable. I think that for one thing, they're quite slow in moving on this pandemic.
Okay, so they're quite slow. There is a question in terms of integrity and use of funds. What else?
Yes. Well,
What about the quarantine?
Well, sa quarantine naman, for example, like Metro Manila was put into a modified ECQ, no? We have no
Mm.
problem with that. I think that that would be that was a good decision, no? For example, Cebu City was put on ECQ. Dapat lamang, no? I think
Mm.
that the IATF again should review this matter because right now the malls are a lot of people are going there and they're not even practicing social distancing.
Mm.
So, as you have said, no, is we're talking about second wave or third wave. We're talking about a continuing solution to this problem. So, okay lang naman yung modified ECQ, but then there must be more of a strictly disciplined, stringent measures to be used. Kaya lang ang problema lang pati yung ating leaders ng kapulisan hindi nakikinig yata. So how would the people listen?
Yeah, okay. Now, we are under modified ECQ. They have the government or the IATF has partially allowed return to work, but the problem is no transportation. There are several reports. I've seen several reports of people leaving their homes at 2 o'clock in the morning, walking for 4 to 5 hours to their job sites, and deciding to live in the job sites, but the job sites don't have the required quarters as pointed out by the IATF. Now, itong situation where yes, you're coming up with solutions, but the solutions are half baked. Like you said, people are going to the malls. Uh, it's obviously a situation where, oh, sige, let's come up with a solution, pero wait and see. And there are so much risks involved.
Yeah, I was talking with the other day. I was talking with Bong Nebriha, no, the
Mm,
spokesman of the MMDA, and he told me that the LTFRB, who should be making decisions on the transportation thing, no? Sabi ko, ang scheme na gusto nilang gawin is that commuters will be transferring public utility vehicles about 2 or 3 times. Sabi ko, that would be quite expensive, no?
mm,
And that would not be uh, good para sa commuters, no? In fact, we cannot even practice social distancing. Why don't you, sabi ko, why don't you, the MMDA had a very good chance to now implement what they were not able to implement many months back, no, sapagkat nagkaroon ng TRO. Yung bang
mm,
all of the provincial provinces will only be in Valenzuela, yung mga northern buses, and then
mm,
the southern buses will be in Santa Rosa. And
mm,
afterwards, we have a point-to-point buses. As I can see, these point-to-point buses actually, there's not a lot of people using it, no? So they can practice social distancing at makakamura pa. Sabi ko, why
mm,
don't you try that? Sabi ni Bong, they're not the ones making decisions, the LTFRB. Sabi ko, baka naman, the thing is, they will still be, you know what, Sito? The thing is,
yeah.
they will still be applying for new franchises. My goodness, anong ibig sabihin nito?
Yeah, but
Money talk na naman yan.
yeah, but
Kako.
Congressman Benny, di ba meron tayong bayanihan to heal as one act? I mean, one would assume that all the superpowers have been given to government to
That's
bypass
right.
all of this red tape.
That's right. That's right. Pero, ano nangyayari? For example, like, okay, these buses, because the jeepneys will not ply their trade muna, no? But these buses, for example, I was told that they will have to apply new franchises. Sabi ko, why do they have to apply new franchises? Ibig sabihin niya, magbabayad na naman ng pera yan. Lugi na nga yung mga bus companies.
Mhm.
Okay? that they just have to use that law that we passed last March 24 to implement. To implement, ibig sabihin to cushion the impact, no, where a lot of people are now going back to work, that they should make transportation available. But in reality, Sito, is they're not doing it as now. Too
Okay.
slow.
Okay, so your assessment is they're too slow. Based on what you're saying is that they are not fully utilizing or they do not fully appreciate the powers you've given to them under the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. They need to do test. What are you said? Okay, you said that the quarantine. That's the one thing they're doing well. What else does the government need to do? I mean, in the area of expertise, paulit-ulit ko tong tinatanong sa mga tao kasi I'm not convinced that the president is surrounded by experts. He's surrounded by his trusted people, and I mean no disrespect. He's surrounded by his cabinet, but in terms of a pandemic, in terms of a national crisis, I think he needs more experts and more teams. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree with that. I hope that I am wrong in my assessment that he's only being surrounded by very small number of men that are close to him. No, I'm wondering why Secretary Duque is not calling the experts. I mean, you know, we have a good number of former secretaries of health that are very good. There was a secretary of health that is actually an expert, epidemiologist. No, I don't know. What's the name of that? I think it's Secretary Valdez or somebody else. No, I
Mhm.
think that the Secretary Duque should get the expert opinions of even of, for example, like PGAs. They're not even calling on the expert in PGAs on that, and they're just waiting. I was talking to my doctor, to my cardiologist, and
Mm.
he said, uh, we're just waiting to be tapped. You know, why don't they call on us so we could be able to give our advice? See, I think Secretary Duque should do it now. I don't blame the Senate for calling on Secretary Duque to resign because of that. See,
Okay.
in fact, Sito, before the pandemic, I filed a resolution calling to investigate area of legislation, the DOH, and the PhilHealth because of massive corruption. Oh,
Mhm.
I hope and I'm praying that they will not use this pandemic for corruption.
Okay, well, I'll leave it at that, Congressman Benny Abante. We still have quite a long list of guests, but thank you very much for your assessment. They're doing the good quarantine. They don't fully appreciate the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. They need to bring in the experts. And in any case, please take care of yourself. I'm sure tatawag-tawagan pa rin naman namin kayo as this
Thank
thing progresses. And we hope you would also bring this to the attention of the president that we
We
need
are.
to
Yes.
evaluate and we need more people in the teams. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Barcito. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Okay. God bless you, sir. That's Congressman Benny Abante of the 6th District of Manila and also the minority floor leader of the House of Representatives. From here on, let's go next to Congressman El Rey Villafuerte because we also need an assessment. There we go. Congressman El Rey, good morning sa'yo.
Good morning, Cito.
Okay, to begin with, may I know because you're in Camarines, may I know your assessment of government action? No politics, no judgment, nothing. Objective assessment. How do you assess the government's performance in the battle against COVID-19? Is it a pass, fail, or an incomplete? Dahil nag-UP ka naman yata, kabisado mo na yon. And what needs to be done more?
Well, yung gobyerno naman doing their best, no? But ako may honest assessment, may mga pagkukulang rin talaga. Kasi yung definition ng ECQ, MECQ, GCQ, while people were awaiting for ano bang difference niyan? Magbubukas ba hindi? Yung transition from ECQ to MECQ to GCQ, hindi malinaw sa tao eh kung ano yung pagkakaiba. Ah, kagaya niya, nagbukas sa mga mall, nagkagulo. While importante rin kasi may disiplina ang tao, pero para sa on the part of the government, kailangan talaga malinaw, clear cut. Sa US, bago sila nagbukas o magbubukas, meron silang 4 na phase. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Then each phase may 2-week gap. Kumbaga nagbukas sila ng manufacturing, food services, pero malinaw in 2 weeks isusunod na yung retail services. So may gap, hindi yung mag-a-announce tayo na magbubukas na wala pang 1 week. Das walang malinaw na guideline. Eh yung tao excited makalabas. So yan, I think there's a lot more room for improvement.
And then walang masakyan.
Walang masakyan. So
Yeah.
and then eto nga, let's just decide they open up next week. How will they manage the queues? Yung pila. Binabasa ko sa ibang bansa, malinaw na po. Ang bilihan ng ticket, nilagay nila hindi lang sa stasyon para hindi magpila. May mga signs na agad kung saan pipila, kung saan pwedeng pumila. Let's say magbukas tayo next week, next month ng public transportation, LRT. Magkakagulo yan. So what I'm saying is, ayusin na natin ngayon yan. Less physical contact, clear guidelines, magagandang signage, na dapat piniprepare na yan because eventually, Cito, we will open up. So let's just assume that we will open up as soon as possible, put up the signage, put up the guidelines, so para ang tao, hindi nalilito. May social media naman, di ba? Ito ang dapat gawin, ito hindi dapat. Although meron namang mga ganyan, pero kulang sa detalye.
In the provinces and among your constituents, at syempre doon sa mga fellow congressmen mo, ano ang nakikita nilang good and bad in terms of the management of the executive department of COVID-19?
Well, yung una-una, nakita naman natin may political will ang gobyerno. So ako ay commend that. Nag-lockdown tayo na maaga. Among the first top 10 in the world na gumawa niyan. Takot ang tao sa gobyerno. Meaning, nung nag-lockdown, in fairness, sumunod naman. Although may mga pasaway, but in general, maganda yon. Yan yung tinatawag na political will. Pero kailangan yung tinatawag na public will, nabasa ko. Yung dapat yung disiplina ng tao within ourselves. Diba? Sa Korea, sila mismo nagdidisiplina. So, yan ang mga bagay na I commend the government. Yung sinasabing second wave, third wave, we have to assume na this is a continuous wave. This is a continuous risk. Yung sinasabi, uy, baka magka-second wave, mag-lockdown. Isipinan po natin ngayon na wag na magkaroon ng another wave para hindi na mag-lockdown. Kasi Sito talaga kawawa ang tao eh. Kailangan magtrabaho na. While we face the risk of this COVID, we want to save lives by doing a lockdown. Nakakalungkot kasi yung mamamatay na sa gutom, saka yung depression. It will sink in. It's already sinking in. So, we have to live a fact that meron ng new normal.
Yeah.
Sana yung mall, pero dapat magdisiplina na tayo. I think now is the time na ang Pilipino magpakita ng disiplina. Kasi Sito, pag nasa ibang bansa naman tayo, disiplinado tayo eh. Bakit nasa sariling bansa hindi tayo magpakita ng disiplina? Nakita mo naman may social distancing na sa mga grocery. Minsan nag-aagawan pa. I mean,
but
hindi lang gobyerno dapat sisiyan.
Congressman, kasi I have to be fair, okay, and I have to speak out for the other people. I get your point. There is discipline, there is political will, and that's all okay. But the public will also tell you, well, the reason we're going crazy is because we have been locked down and everything has been taken away from us. I mean, you have to realize, okay, noon, basta mag-physical distancing ka, pwede kang pumunta sa kanto, pwede kang pumunta sa supermarket. Biglang, hindi. Ngayon, X number of days na lang. And now, even in many places in Metro Manila, it's down to 2 days, isang tao na lang. Hindi katulad noon na, sige, pupunta lang ako sa kanto. And even under MECQ. In fact, the general sentiment is the government or local government actually lalo pang hinigpitan ng hinigpitan at ang tao, ang Pilipino, mentras mong hinihigpitan yan, lalong pumipiglas yan. And I guess I'm sharing this with you because you are a representative, you are a congressman, and perhaps this needs to be addressed. If we expect people to comply, we should also recognize people's needs and people's conditions. Because sabi nga ni Secretary Cabral, arresting people because of quarantine violation and throwing them into a room full of people, you're not doing any better than the violator. You've just contaminated your violator. So pinapaabot ko lang yun, so that people would hear both sides of the discussion. But going back to Camarines Sur,
Pero can I just comment on that 1 minute? Tama
Yes, sir.
po kayo kasi marami naman talagang LGU na abusado at hindi nakakaintindi ng sitwasyon eh. Kagaya sa
Yeah.
Camarines Sur, marami doon may mayor doon na naglalagay pa ng checkpoint na sinabi naman ng gobyerno, PNP na lang. Tapos pagpapasok ka sa bayan, kada barangay meron, nakakaabala na. So kami pinapadismantle po namin yan eh. Kasi merong iba kasi, lockdown, parang gusto maglagay ng checkpoint. Ang lockdown, dapat i-ensure na lang na wag lumabas ang bahay, stay home, stay safe. Pero yung overacting na yung iba, tama po kayo, Cito. Kailangan ayusin po yan.
Okay. Now, going back to going to another topic, Congressman El Rey Villafuerte, yung pong sa ABS-CBN, because we weren't able to connect with you yesterday. Matanong ko lang, medyo there are serious concerns that were aired last night in media that given that you guys are about to go on a 2.5-month recess, baka maging sarsuela itong supposed processing of the ABS-CBN franchise. Kasi may nagsasabing, nako, imposibleng mapalabas yung franchise na yan until after the 2.5-month recess of Congress.
Well, una-una, Cito, tama kayo, magbe-break kami June 4, babalik kami July na, SONA na. So, roughly a month and a half. But nag-assure
okay.
naman po si Speaker na we will have a session as soon as possible, continuous session, non-stop. At kung kailangan na mag-hear kahit may break, papakinggan po namin yan. While sinasabi nga namin ang priority COVID, bibigyan na rin natin attention priority to dahil talagang contentious, divisive talaga to. Ayun na ngayon, kasi nakakalungkot na talaga, the past 2 days wala kaming pinag-usapan kundi ABS. We have to accept the fact na pag ABS na ang pinapakinggan, mismo pati congressman na doon nakatutok. Yan na sana namin gusto i-avoid. Kasi nakatutok doon yung media eh. So halos lahat gusto mag-participate. Nasa-sacrifice lang yung ibang COVID-related measures. Kailangan namin mag-pass ng stimulus package, possibly supplemental budget. But sinabi po ni Speaker, be that as it may, papakinggan na po namin yan na marathon session, non-stop session, and we will do our best. But Cito, ang gusto talaga namin, magkaroon ng impartial, comprehensive hearing. Kasi marami kasi nag-demand, aproban nyo na yan. Una-una ayaw namin mag-set ng precedent just because by ABS, 1-day hearing na lang. Samantalang marami dyan maliliit na franchise, inaabot ng taon, maybe more. So, sa kapag pinagbigyan namin to at this point, sabihin na iba, nabayaran na yan, na-impluensya niyan. So, we have to be careful. But one thing we can assure you, hindi sarsuela yan. Bakit? Nakatutok ang tao, nakatutok ang media.
So 100% confident kayo that the temporary franchise will be submitted to the office of the to the Senate and to the office of the President before the recess.
Hindi po eh, 'di ba nagbago na kahapon, 'di ba? Ang nangyari na, nagdesisyon na ng majority, nag-caucus po kami ng 3 PM, nag-decide na ang majority na ituloy na lang yung hearing ng 25-year franchise. Wala na pong provisional franchise. Kasi
okay.
ang nangyari nga, 'di ba, may nagka-question.
Yeah,
but
yeah, because sorry, kasi medyo narito ako about that, Congressman Villafuerte. But you were saying that if you go for the 25-year franchise, di kailangan pag-aralan ng husto, pag-aralan lahat. You cannot possibly do that before the recess.
Yes, that's the reality. Hindi po namin kayang mapasa po ang 25-year franchise dahil gusto nga namin komprehensibo, marinig lahat ng for and against.
So ano ipapasa ninyo? Di wala.
Ngayon po, maghihiring po kami for the 25-year franchise na. At I have to admit, we only have 6 session days left
Yeah.
prior to the break.
Okay, so no franchise until after SONA.
I think that's the reality kasi hindi talaga kaya ng 6 days. Yung
No,
mga oppositor lang, abutin niya ng more than 6 days.
No. Your position. I have to be fair. That's valid. That's provision of law, requirement of legislation, and processing. So I think what I just want to, and many people would want, is just a clear answer. Kasi nagkakalituhan na. Everybody, even I was under the impression we're talking about a temporary franchise na ibibigay para lang mabawasan na itong init ng ulo at mga gulo-gulo nito at intrigahan until the proper processing is done. But as it stands, if there is no longer any talk of a temporary franchise, then we are not talking about any franchise until after the recess.
Tama po kayo kasi intention, ako yung author ng bill na magkaroon ng provisional. Gusto sana namin magkaroon ng air muna ang ABS habang pinapakinggan. Kaya lang nakita mo naman na nangyari, ang dami nag-question, bakit raw 5 months, bawal raw yan. Sinasadya raw namin na gawin yan dahil para pagdating sa Supreme Court, ma-deny. Yung iba naman sinabi, uy, na-impluensya niya, nabayaran niya. So, alam mo, maraming nangyayari ngayon. Kaya, alam mo, ang katotohanan sito, contentious, divisive to. Hati ang bayan dito hindi natin madadaan sa paspasan to. And we will not be fulfilling our mandate to have an impartial, comprehensive hearing. Ako, to be personal, sito ako neutral. I have not decided. Nagmamasid ako, ano bang issues for or against? Maraming against. Dapat linawin po ng ABS ang pagsagot. Pag nasagot nila ng tama, tula yung akusasyon naman ay hindi totoo, we will grant. Kung meron man violation sila, inadmit nila, kungari, labor case, bayaran naman nila, di ko consider namin. I mean, these things we are open.
Okay. Last question, Congressman Villafuerte. Okay, assuming no franchise until after the recess, sa palagay mo, gaano katagal aabutin yung paghihimay, pag-iimbestiga at pagproseso ng franchise for ABS-CBN after the SONA?
Actually, Sito, yan ang tinanong bakit ba binigay mo na October 31? I think yun yung self-imposed deadline namin na hopefully by October, on or before October 31, all sides were already heard at makakapag-desisyon na kami. So for me, personally, I cannot speak for my other colleagues. Ako feeling ko on or before October 31, we can decide. But that's just my personal opinion. Alam mo, sa hearing, Sito, rules of court, malalaman mo yan sa first, second hearing. Kasi pag naglabasan yung mga kontra, dyan magkakaroon ng idea kung tatagal. Isipin mo, 200 congressmen. Yung iba 4, iba against. Bigyan mo ng 10 minutes each to speak. 2,000 minutes na yon. Ilan araw na yan. Yung rebuttal, dun magkakaroon ng problema. Kung mag-round 2 pa, pag may sabi ng congressman, hindi ako masaya sa 10 minutes ko, gusto ko pa magsalita, dyan magkakaroon ng Then yung issue, for example, on labor cases, labor laws violated, ilan ba magreklamo? Issue on citizenship, constitutional, tax laws, alleged tax laws. So, in the rules of court, Sito, inuuna muna natin yung kontra, di ba? Pakinggan muna natin lahat ng oppose.
But does all of that fall under the process, the processing of the franchise? Hindi ba dapat yung labor issues ipadala yan sa DOLE? Yung mga citizenship issues, padala yan doon sa SEC and sa Supreme Court or whatever. Meaning, I'm just thinking, shouldn't all of these technical issues be addressed to the appropriate offices, and the Committee on Franchise addresses nothing else but the franchise itself?
Salamat, tinanong mo yan dahil marami talaga nalilito dyan. Sabi niya, related ba sa franchise? Opo, kasi nag-a-apply ABS-CBN Corporation, and we will analyze, does this corporation, tama ba ang ginagawa niya in the past 25 years? Pwede ba natin siyang bigyan ulit ng franchise kung mabuti siyang kumpanya? Pero for example, yung issue ng Constitution, malinaw sa Constitution, Filipino citizen lang ang dapat may-ari ng media. May akusasyon na si Gabi Lopez may Philippine passport. So kailangan sagutin po niya yun. Then may documentary evidence. We will ask that from the US Embassy, US Government, Bureau of Immigration. Kasi kung may violation, constitutional violation yun. Grounds for revocation and in this case, non-renewal. Totoo ba na yung labor, nag-violate siya ng labor laws? Pinapatrabaho ba nila ang mga tao beyond what is required by law? Pag totoo, anong violation? Kung pwede naman pagbigyan, pwede. Kung hindi, kung gross, siyempre, sasabihin ng Congress, hindi na pwedeng pagpatuloy ng kumpanya yan dahil kung ginawa nila yan noon, gagawin nila ulit ngayon. Yung tax laws, sinabi, bilyon ang kinita pero milyon lang ang binayad. Totoo ba po yan? Kasi pa nag-violate ka niyan, hindi ka karapat-dapat bigyan ng prangkisa po.
Okay. I'll leave it at that, Congressman El Rey Villafuerte, and good luck. Sana po makapagbakasyon kayo ng maayos pag nagka-break because sigurado ako pagbalik mo ay sasakit ang ulo mo, hindi lang sa trabaho kundi pati sa media. Thank you very much, Congressman El Rey, and please stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cito. God bless.
Okay, that's Congressman El Rey Villafuerte. Nabigyan po tayo ng maraming paglilinaw tungkol dyan sa performance ng gobyerno regarding COVID-19 as well as the status of the ABS-CBN franchise. Medyo malungkot because apparently no franchise is going to be issued. And they're estimating that to be until October 31 at Best Picture. In the meantime, many of my friends, former colleagues in ABS-CBN, will now be wondering what's life going to be for them in the next 5 months. In any case, let's move on to our next guest. We've invited our next guest to basically help us. He's an HR executive. He's vice president for Semirara Mining Corporation. And because there's a return to work in certain industries, the question is, how do you figure out your return to normal? Because there are many companies now in the United States who are discovering, and in Asia, who are discovering, with this work from home system is wonderful because the employees can stay home and we don't have to rent such expensive office spaces in such expensive location. Let's bring in Mr. Jojo, or is it Mr. or okay, Mr. Jojo Tandok, Vice President for HR of Semirara Mining and Power Corporation. Jojo, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cito, and I'm glad to be back.
Okay. My question is this. Okay. I read recently, actually, it was shared by Bu Chanko of the Philippine Star, the article where big companies are discovering that they don't need to rent office spaces anymore, or they can now scale down kasi most of their employees are working from home. Nobody wants to have a person-to-person engagement. Everything is virtual. Now, what's the reality as far as you know in the field of HR? What's happening now? What is the discussion regarding office space, office addresses, and rentals?
You know, Cito, in most organizations right now, work from home is very critical. Ito po yung pinaka-importante sa lahat. And sinasabi nga namin, ang work from home, before it was a taboo, but now it has changed. It has dramatically changed, and a lot of organizations are moving towards this direction, even traditional organizations ito. Now, looking at work from home, sabi nga, nung pagka-start ng lockdown, maraming organizations ang nabigla, na-shock. But they have no choice but to do work from home to continue with their operations. In the Philippines, a lot of organizations adopted this work scheme, Cito. But of course, when we talk about work from home, ang laki ng tulong nito sa kumpanya at sa mga manggagawa because number one, in the case of the employers, kailangan nila mag-scale down ngayon ng space. A lot of BPO organizations are actually rethinking their space options. Hindi naman pala nila kailangan ng ganong kalaking space to rent out and they will save a lot of expense for space rental. When we talk about employees naman, syempre, considering the traffic situation in the Philippines, considering the current condition of our transportation, this is very helpful for the employees kasi they're at home, they can work, they can be more productive, and they can do a lot of things while at the same time they are with their families. Pero Sito, hindi lang kasi work from home yung alternative work arrangements. Actually, maraming labor advisories na binigay ang Department of Labor on different alternative work arrangements. Kasama dito pa rin yung pinag-usapan natin noon na mayroong compressed work week. So when we talk about compressed work week, hindi naman kailangang magtrabaho ng 6 days a week, maaaring 5 days a week. So kasama din po dito yung pinag-usapan natin about reduction of work days and reduction of work hours. Some organizations right now are actually doing reduction of work hours considering that may issue tayo ng transportation. Sa modified ECQ, wala pa namang public transportation, wala pang MRT, wala pang LRT.
Correct.
So, ang ginagawa ng mga kumpanya ngayon, reduction of work hours. So, instead of 8 to 5, maaring 8 to 3 o 8 to 4 lang para maagang makauwi yung mga empleyado sa kanilang mga bahay.
Okay,
so,
Jojo,
yes.
Please let me cut in, because I'm a crisis management consultant on the side.
Yes.
And if I were called in by a company now, the first thing I would do is let's do an impact assessment. Meaning, ano ang tama ng COVID-19 sa operations ng kumpanya, ano ang tama sa cash flow, tama sa receivables, ano ang tama sa profits, etc. and sales. And then, ano yung burden of operation para maplano. Kasi ang worry ko right now is a lot of people, a lot of companies are immediately just saying goodbye to their employees. There are people who are saying, okay, we'll pay you half your salary. Given the reality of COVID-19, what should management be doing first? Because you are in HR, what do most companies or your associates suggest to management? What should we do first?
Well, essentially, on the context of the HR perspective, Cito, is we look into our operations. So when we look into our operations, we revisit our manpower plan. So when we revisit our manpower plan, we're looking at the perspective of, okay, kung ito yung ating operations, nag-scale down tayo, gaano ba kalaki ang manpower requirements ng ating kumpanya for our operations to continue? And based from this perspective, Cito, and that's the time we do some reviews of the different processes. Pag nireview namin yung different processes ng iba't ibang departamento, doon namin malalaman gaano ba kalaki ang manpower requirements ng bawat departments. At
so
kapag
you're saying essentially, sooner or later, you will have to dependent on the manpower requirements and the business model, laying off people will be inevitable.
At certain point, Cito, we cannot deny the fact that this is inevitable. And most organizations are looking at this perspective. And that's the reason why the Department of Labor are coming up with different alternative work arrangements in order not to go to this direction.
Yeah, but the question is, but the question, Jojo, is, okay, I know what you're saying. Maraming alternatives to slow down the inevitable. Kung baka sakali, pag binawasan yung workdays, sinaffle natin yan, kahit pa paano, the organization will survive. Okay, but at the end of the day, anong nangyari? Tanggalan pa rin.
Kasi Sito, tingnan natin well, at the end of the day, business is business. We
Okay, well,
operate and exist because of the business.
I think
And
Jojo, that was your best answer, and I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time. But that was
I
the best
understand, Sito.
answer. Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you,
that is the
Sito.
best answer. Business is business.
Business is business.
Okay, thank you, Jojo Tandok.
Thank you so much, Sito.
Please stay strong, stay healthy, and stay safe. And God bless you, Jojo.
You too as
Okay.
well, Sito. Thank you.
I don't want to be in Jojo's position, honestly, because of course their first concern will be the viability of the company, the survival of the business, and I'm so sorry that we had to cut that interview short because we are really watching our time. But in any case, I just want to share a quick story. When I was with another company many years back, they had invited a foreign speaker, and most of the executives didn't want to listen, didn't said, "Oh, that's just an HR thing." But I went in, and the speaker had a very long presentation, but the gist of it was in it many companies abroad made so much profit, achieved so much growth during the good years, but when the bad years hit, what the first thing they did was they cut their staffing, they let go of people, and what happened was as they let go of people, they ended up letting go of the very people who helped them achieve those milestones and those high points and those profit margins. And so when things came back to normal, they no longer had those people. Those people had moved on because they were laid off, they were let go, and the companies could no longer achieve the historical accomplishments that they had because the people were no longer there. So that's just a thought. And I've also seen stories of companies in the United States where I just can't remember the person's name, but one executive had the choice to let go of 30% of their people to survive, or for people to make sacrifices. And he called everyone in the company and said, I can choose out of the bucket 30% of our workforce who will be laid off, or we can all take pay cuts, we can all take forced vacations, we can all just make sacrifices, and hopefully after a year we'll all still be together and we can all recover from these losses. And everyone actually said, hey, we're good to go. We are going to make the sacrifices. We are willing to take salary cuts. And I think that's, in fact, what Cebu Pacific executives have done. They've taken salary cuts. And it's something to think about for those of you who are now struggling with that decision. Because I like what Secretary Cabral said, compassion. We need to have compassion even in the worst of times, and that's even biblical. I just can't remember which tribe it was who, in the worst of their needs, who in the worst of times gave generously. And I know you're going to be blessed. Okay, let's go to the officer in charge of the Tricycle Operation and Regulatory Office, or TORO, of Pasig City. We have online Mr. Volta de los Santos. Volta, magandang umaga sa iyo.
Good morning po, Sir Cito.
Okay, nakadinig na ako ng motorsiklo dito sa may tapat ng bahay ko, tricycle eh. Pinapayagan na ba sa Pasig ang mga tricycle? Ano ba ang kondisyon sa pag-operate ng mga tricycle?
Yes, sir, Cito. So finally nga, last Friday, pinayagan na po ng DILG na mag-operate po ang tricycle dito sa Pasig City under some conditions po and under some guidelines po na ibinaba nila. No? Number one po, kailangan isa lang po ang pasahero po at kailangan po ay may plastic po, no, between sa tricycle driver at mga pasahero. At syempre po kailangan din po na nakamask po. And also may mga sinusunod din po kami no na bago pong fare matrix na pansamantalang pinatupad po under the MECQ na sa unang kilometro po ay 20 pesos po ang kailangang isingil dahil nag-iisa nga lang po ang pasahero. At sa mga susunod po na sa succeeding kilometer po ay mayroon po additional na 5 pesos po ang singil.
Okay, yan. Meron naman kayong hotline para sa mga nagsisingil ng mataas. Kasi nagtataka ako dahil alam mo, nagta-tricycle din ako at alam ko yung kilometro simula doon sa TV5 hanggang sa bahay ko dito sa Kapitolyo. It's exactly 1 to 1.2 kilometers depende kung sa aling side yung iikutan ng tricycle. Pero ang binabayad ko pag single 24. Paano nalabanan ngayon?
Ay, opo. Sa ngayon po, yung katulad po yan dahil mag-isa lang po sila. No? So 24, parang pasok pa rin po. No? Actually, 25 pesos. Pero nakausap po kasi namin yung ibang presidente ng TODA. At kung pasok naman yung existing nilang fare matrix doon sa per kilometer na ipinatupad sa under MECQ, yung pa rin naman po yung yung 24 pesos. Yung pa rin po yung ipapatupad nila.
Ayun, okay. So sana po ay ma-monitor ninyo yan at malaman natin kung ano ang kalalabasan and thank you very much. Pakisabi na lang kay Mayor, maraming salamat at napayagan na ang mga tricycle. Alam ko matagal niyang pinaglalaban yan at malaking bagay yan sa ating mga Pasigenyo. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you po. Sir Cito, nga pala, no, yun, nabanggit nyo po. No, kapag meron po mga reklamo, pwede po silang mag-message po sa ugnayan sa Pasig po. No, sa official po yan na Facebook page ng Pasig City. At yun, tuwa po no, ang mga tricycle drivers dahil ilang buwan din po talaga sila nagtiis. Kahit po nagbigay ng financial assistance na Pasig City, sila po ang unang binigyan ng financial assistance na 4,000 pesos. But that was 2 months ago at alam naman po natin na hindi lang po talaga ito sumapat. At ngayon continuous pa rin po yung pagbibigay ng supplemental ASAP ng Pasig City at kasama pa rin naman po ang mga tricycle drivers doon kahit po nakatanggap na sila ng financial assistance noong una. So tuwang-tuwa po sila at ang inihiling lang din po talaga namin sa sumunod sila doon sa
Sige. Salamat Volta de los Santos. Mag-ingat ka. Please stay safe, stay strong and stay healthy. God bless you, Volta.
God bless you.
Okay, yan po si Volta de los Santos, OIC for the Tricycle Operation and Regulatory Office of Pasig City. And last but not the least, let's go to, I don't know if he will still be able to make it because he still has an ongoing interview. Joey Concepcion. I was commenting earlier when we were setting up with Joey Concepcion. I was telling Joey Con that, you know, the longer time goes, the more and more we begin to look alike like our parents. And of course, minus the added weight and padding. But we're beginning to look and act like our parents, and we will never be able to escape the genetic aspect of reality. Now, while we are connecting with the Presidential Advisor on Entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion, I just want to remind, sorry, I don't think we will be able to get Joey Con today. There's been a problem in the connection. We will try to get him tomorrow for his assessment. But let me wrap things up. Apparently, based on the response from our guests today, there is nothing that you would say is alarmingly or dangerously wrong in how the government is handling the fight against COVID-19. They're getting good marks as far as doing the lockdown. And the only area would be that the need for more testing and, of course, better communication. And as our guest have pointed out, the Secretary Cabral said there must be compassion And as I shared with Congressman El Rey Villafuerte, yes, we need discipline, but we also need consideration, kung sabihin nila sa Tagalog, from government, particularly from the LGUs. Hindi po pwede yung habang lumalapit sa finish line, pahigpit ng pahigpit, at pagdating sa finish line, ay lalo pa naman ninyong papahabain, tapos lalo pa ninyong hihigpitan. Siyempre, kahit po aso, higpitan nyo ng higpitan ang tanikala, ay ito ay pipiglas, magpupumiglas at magagalit. So as far as the government handling of the situation is concerned, no high marks, they're passing, they're not failing, but in many areas, they're still incomplete. They need a lot of testing, they need better communication, and more consultation, more than ever. The government, and I hope the word gets to President Rodrigo Duterte, Sir, we support you, we understand you. Sinabi ko nga sa column ko today, you are entitled to visit your apos or to see your family, or at least have your presence felt in Davao, because talaga naman yan ang bayan ng mahal mo. Pero paano naman si Eddie? And if you ask, sinong Eddie? Eddie kami. Hindi kami makapunta sa aming mga farm, hindi kami makapunta sa aming mga lolo, mga lola, hindi kami makaikot. Kahit na sila walang sakit, kami walang sakit, hindi na-address itong system po na ito. Perhaps if we bring in more experts or consult more people and create more committees or distribute the work, many problems, many nuances, many issues would be addressed, because the IATF and the small group of people around you are not enough. They mean well, they're trying their best, but they have to be the first to admit hindi nila kayang pasanin ang buong Pilipinas. They need to call a friend. We are your friends, kaming mga Pilipino, inyong mga kababayan are your friends. Sali naman po ninyo kami. And that's today's agenda. We hope that you will all continue to stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, and continue praying. Because at the end of the day, however long all of this takes, we need to be resolved in our belief that God is good, God is great, and God is going to take care of everything. Please take care of yourselves and pray for us too. Include us in your prayers. God bless all of you. I'm Cito Beltran, and that's Agenda.